الله رحيم الله مالك الله قدس الله.
What circle nature?
You just said there's one nature. Okay, so is it two?
I never said it has one nature. I
You
said
said there's one nature.
Okay,
You said there's one shape, is this one
Wallahi,
nature?
I never said one nature, but whatever. Look, we're
Okay, so
saying
this
one
shape-
shape. Okay,
Okay,
one
so this
shape.
shape,
You want,
is it-
please, I'm going to say this one last time. I'll let you speak. One shape that has corners, qua square nature, and no corners, qua circle nature. Can you show me
Okay,
how is this?
What does shape mean?
A shape? Is this going to be like some closed figure?
Yeah, closed figure. Okay, cool. Yeah, let me be more specific. So a shape is gonna have a form, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the form is going to be form is just going off that thing, right?
Doesn't really matter to me, but sure.
Yeah. So okay. So if there's one shape and there's one form, then there isn't going to, and especially when it comes to this form itself and its definition, the definition is going to be like negate another form. Let's say, for example, so like a triangle or whatever, right? So a triangle has a form, a triangle has a particular definition. Within that definition, it's just going to like negate the definition with the form of a circle. So if you're saying there's one shape, there's going to be one form. Therefore, there isn't going to be two forms which is considered.
wait. So your whole symmetry breaker is just telling me that the way I've articulated it is contradictory?
The whole symmetry break of it is to show that there isn't
That's
actually
all you've said.
space.
All you've said is that
There
me
isn't
saying that it's
symmetry.
going to be a
I
square
think you
negates
misunderstood.
it being a circle.
You misunderstood. I said the whole explanation is to show that there isn't like two natures actually being considered, but only one nature, because nature corresponds to the form of a thing. That's the whole point. Because
Okay,
if you
and
say there's one
I'm saying its form has corners and it doesn't have corners at the same time.
yeah, that's just going to be contradictory.
That's the point. That's the
Yeah,
point.
but that
Thank
doesn't.
you,
Yeah,
Yuan.
but that's
the
not
point.
how. Yeah, but that's yeah. But when it comes to the hypostatic union, we're not saying there's one form in which there's going to be.
You're
divine
saying
attributes
that there's two
and human
natures, but you're
attributes.
saying that one nature precludes the other. That's what you just told me.
That's false. We don't say that. What? Who told you
I'm not
that?
saying that you say that. I'm saying what you just told me with my analogy is contradictory because even though I'm saying it has corners and it doesn't have corners at the same time, like qua circleness, qua squareness, you said it's still going to be a contradiction.
Yeah, because I showed to you.
It's still gonna
Yeah,
be
because I showed to you.
Now,
Yeah,
I'm
because
talking
I
about
showed
the-
to you. Hold on, brother. It's because I showed to you how that is going to be the case. Like you stated, you're seeing X, Y, and Z, but we just analyze the whole idea of the shape
Right, so
itself
because-
to
would you
show
say that
how it
because
is
it
going
has-
to induce.
Okay, would
like
you say
another
that because it
nature.
has square properties, it could not possess circular properties?
Because it has square. Repeat
Would
it
you
again.
agree with that? Because the shape has square properties, it cannot possess circle properties.
Of course.
Okay, and that's exactly what I'm saying too. Because Christ has divine properties, he cannot possess human properties insofar as that these human properties conflict with the divine properties. We're saying the same thing.
That doesn't. No, we're not saying it's the same thing because look, when it comes to the shape example, there's one form, there's one nature, one definition.
You keep telling me, but I'm telling you that there's two
Whereas no, because you're talking about the divine nature, and the divine nature has its own definition, which is really different.
Right. And I'm saying that
Yeah, hold on.
squares have
Hold on.
definitions that are really distinct from circle definitions.
Yes, but we're not saying that. Look, because with your example, you're saying that both of the definitions like are unified in a sense, right?
I'm saying that both of these definitions are being applied, these contrary definitions, because you just said that the divine nature and the human nature have different definitions. Okay, squares and circles have different definitions. I'm saying both of these definitions are being ascribed to one and the same shape.
Yeah, and I'm
Same
saying
way
the
that
reason
you
why
would
this
say,
is going to be
the
analogous.
same way that you would say both of these definitions of divinity and humanity are being ascribed to one and the same person. I'm saying the
No,
same thing.
because person isn't going to be like a nature or form. That's the whole point. Because we're not saying that, for example, the suppositum is the definition by which both of these like qualities consist in. Because that would be contradictory, but that's not what we're eliciting. That's what I'm saying. Your analogy is just going to fall face flat because what we're trying to say here is that when it comes to, for example, the human nature, it has its own definition. Both of these definitions are formally different, right? And it has like a correspondence to the agent because the agent possesses these two natures. But that doesn't necessarily mean.
So how has this been anything different than what I'm saying?
Because mine is two different respects, while yours is one respect. Because you're saying that there's one shape, there's one form. Well, if this one form consists of these predicates, right, which are contradictory, then there's going to be one definition understood. There isn't going to be two definitions understood, only one. Whereas when it comes to the divine nature and the human nature, there's still two definitions understood, not one definition understood. So you can be saying, oh yeah, like you're trying to like analogize this to the hypostatic union, but that isn't the case because there's still one definition understood. So there's still one respect. Whereas the hypostatic union, there's two definitions understood. So there's two different respects. It's not really hard. That's why when it comes to, oh, he's not even here. Christian Corp, bro. This guy. What are you talking about, Yappa, bro? Mr. Definitions exist outside of that. Yeah, this guy's a troll.
G1.
The wrong one.
Do you think I could be co-substantial with the Father?
Do you think you can be co-substantial with the Father? Could you be sure if the Father incarnated?
No, the Father hasn't. Right now, do you think God could make it to where I'm co-substantial with the Father?
That's kind of ambiguous. Are you saying like pertaining to his divinity or pertaining to like if he assumed humanity?
I'm saying right now, Jesus is co-substantial with the Father, right?
Yeah.
Could I be co-substantial with the Father and Jesus?
In the same way of how the Son is co-substantial with the Father?
Yeah, in the same way that I partake of the divine essence.
No.
What's the contradiction?
What's the contradiction? I say the inconsistency would be that, modally speaking, like you as a person is like created. So it wouldn't be a case where...
Yeah, but I would be created only insofar as my human nature and uncreated insofar as my divine nature that I share with the Father.
No, because your personhood is created. Because when it comes to your human nature...
I'm only as a person created insofar as my human nature.
Yes, whereas when it comes to the divine nature, the personhoods are not created.
Right, so there's no problem in that. If as long as I specify which nature, then there's no problem.
There is a problem because when it comes to the divine persons, right, they imply the divine nature, and the divine nature is uncreated. And if the divine nature is uncreated and terminates in the persons, then the persons are also going to be uncreated. Whereas when it comes to you, your human nature designates or terminates in your personhood, which is created.
No, I would be uncreated insofar divine.
You'll be uncreated. Fine.
Okay, so then let's try this way. Okay. Do you think that Jesus is a temporal being or a temporal being?
Do I think Jesus is a temporal being or a temporal being? Or it depends what the term Jesus is picking out.
The person. What else?
Depends on how the statement's being qualified. If we're saying...
Is Jesus temporal or atemporal?
Perfect. No, because then he wants to do like a quantitative state. Wait, Danny, I want your... Because my phone... That we have this one person of Christ who possesses these two distinct natures, and he fully possesses the properties of each nature without contradiction. Okay, like more or less, that's the hypostatic union, right? Now, I gave him the analogy of one shape that possesses the properties of a square and simultaneously possesses the properties of a circle. And these two, square nature and circle nature, remain distinct while being fully true of the same shape at the same time. So this shape is fully square, it has corners, and it's also fully circular, it has no corners. Do you think that's analogous, number one? And number two, what's your input on it?
It's analogous. He's going to have to, the way that he's going to have to reply is that the difference would be the set of divine properties are not mutually exclusive with a set of human properties.
Right, that's the only way around it, right? Now hold
Right.
on, G1. Now you go ahead, tell me your symmetry breaker for the analogy. What made it disanalogous?
I already told you it's going to be two different respects in the state. Because you're saying...
But I'm saying it's two different respects, and you're saying Christ is also
but
qualified
you're
by two
saying,
different respects.
you're saying that, but that isn't the case when we actually applies.
That's why I'm saying that the hypostatic union, this qua nature lingo, is just a linguistic resolution.
It's not linguistic. Because
Wait,
the
maybe,
analogy-
so let's just
How
ask
is
him
what I'm
this.
saying any different?
I think this might be a clarifying question. G1, do you think there are any properties of human that are mutually exclusive with properties of the divine?
What do you mean by like mutually exclusive? Like
In the way that it's
It's not
mutually
close.
exclusive, the properties of bachelor and the properties of husband have mutually exclusive properties. One is married, one is not.
Yeah, sure.
They have mutually exclusive properties.
You said mutually. How you designate mutually exclusive to indicate again?
That their properties about one that
Cannot be true at the same time. That's
Right.
what mutually
So
exclusive
you're
is.
saying you're saying there's properties of one which cannot be true of another property, considering the
it's
nature.
not look
Yeah, what he
they're
just said.
properties of a circle, right? And they're properties of a square. Some of these properties are mutually exclusive in the way that if a subject of a sentence possess both predicates, you can derive a contradiction.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Now, G1.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I want you to say, how is this disanalogous without just saying...
Well, let's go back to this. So, do you think there are mutually exclusive properties between the predicate circle and square? G1.
Predicate circle and square. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. What about, are there mutually exclusive properties of God and human?
So insofar, like, are you? Because I really want to understand. So when you say like mutually exclusive properties, right? Are you saying that there's going to be like a real
same
difference
way,
between the properties, or you're just
exact-
saying that the properties cannot be included in the thing itself, like
No, the same way you understand.
in the same sense?
Okay. So that means that for any subject of a sentence, they couldn't possess both are mutually exclusive properties of God and human. They're
No,
hypostatic
I
union is done.
wouldn't say. No, I wouldn't really say the same thing. Because I don't know, like, okay, can you give me another example of like mutually exclusive?
Yeah, so there's the predicate bachelor, there's the predicate wife, okay? There's a certain set of properties that are entailed by being a bachelor and being a wife. Those properties, some of them are mutually exclusive. For instance, being a bachelor, you got to be a man. Being a wife, you can't be a man, okay? So they're mutually exclusive, such that for any subject of a sentence, right, couldn't simultaneously hold to the predicate is a wife and is a bachelor.
Okay, yeah, I don't think the properties are going to be mutually exclusive. Then.
Okay, so,
Because it
you're
just-
saying
it
the
just seems
predicate
that-
is human and
It
the
just seems that
predicate...
the properties, yeah, because it just seems the properties are like contradictory, right? Like for example, like
Yeah, that's another
Mutually
mutually
exclusive
exclusive.
is-
yeah, I don't think I wouldn't say like the properties are contradictory, rather they're
Okay.
contrary.
Wait, so,
Is-
okay,
is-
contrary or not,
Wait.
contrary or not, they can't be true at the same time.
Yeah, of course, but
Okay,
then
that's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
contradictories and contrary is not the same thing.
Yeah. Bachelor and wife are not contradictory in that sense. You can be not a woman, and you can also be married. You can be like a husband. So it's not contradictory. But they're mutually exclusive insofar as both can't be true at the same time. We're saying the same thing. You're just trying to do like some dialectical move.
Dialectical move. Wait, repeat the last statement again. So you're saying the same thing pertaining to the hypostatic union.
Yeah.
Well,
what you're saying, because
here's a way to do it. Do you think that the predicate is God implies atemporality? Atemporal?
The predicate is God. Does it play atemporal? Yeah. It does.
Okay. Do you think the property is human implies atemporal?
Yeah.
Oh, so humans can be atemporal.
Oh, I thought you said temporal.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was the natural thing that I should have said. Do you think humans imply not atemporal?
Not atemporal. Yeah.
Okay, so then that means that they have mutually exclusive properties, human and God.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say. Yeah, but I wouldn't. Yeah, but I would be like, okay, so you're saying in this respect there'll be mutually exclusive properties. Right. I wouldn't say like but atemporality is more of like a negative property.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but would you say that they're contrary? Like you can't be atemporal and temporal?
Yeah, of course you can't be atemporal, temporal.
Hey, then that's the whole point.
But I'm stating when it comes to the example which you gave, like when we actually analyze it, properly speaking, it talks about like one shape, one definition of a thing. So we can't really necessarily say that the predicates which are contrary are contained in this definition.
I don't understand. Look, let's use the bachelor and let's use the husband and the wife example. Okay, so I would say they're mutually exclusive in that man and wife implies not man, right?
Repeat again. You said wife implies what?
The reason for why the properties of husband and wife are mutually exclusive is that one implies man, the other one implies not man, right?
Yeah.
Right. So then for any subject of a sentence, they couldn't simultaneously possess both predicates, right? In virtue of the fact that they have two mutually exclusive properties, man and not man.
Yeah.
All right. So then God doesn't imply time, in time?
The term God.
No, atemporal. It implies atemporal, right?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Okay. And human, does it imply atemporal?
Yes.
Atemporal, sorry.
You say you implies temporal, right?
Does human imply atemporal?
No, it doesn't imply atemporal.
No, so you get temporal and not atemporal. So they have mutually exclusive properties, follows the exact logical form.
Sure.
And so then you can't really say that a subject of a sentence can possess both predicates.
Yeah, but we're not saying that the subject of the sentence possesses both predicates in the same.
You're not saying that Jesus is God and that Jesus is...
Wait, Danny, this is so perfect. You're saying, okay, you're qualifying it by two different senses, and I'm using the same language. I'm saying that this shape has corners. I'm qualifying corners via square nature, and I'm qualifying no corners via circle nature. So what is the disanalogy here?
I really told you that this analogy is just going to be two different respects, which is being, like, for example.
Yeah, two different respects, and that's exactly what you're saying too. That Christ possesses them.
You're just saying, linguistically speaking, you're saying that's the case when we apply this like concept. No, but no, that isn't going to be the case because.
Wait, so just here, wait, let me get this straight.
And you're just saying you're applying this linguistic framework to this analogy to show that it's analogous.
G1, look, it's not supposed to be an analogy, really. It's supposed to be an example of a certain logic, right? There's a distinction between analogy and an example. There's a logic that...
Yeah, I understand that, but look, but I'm saying that there's always going to be a qualification. Like, for example, when we say like Jesus... So when we say like Jesus is temporal, right, we're saying Jesus is temporal insofar as he has a human nature. So there's a qualification which is going to be induced. And then
this is a formal problem, right? It's an explicit formal problem. The content of the terms don't matter anymore because I can formalize it.
It's like, no, there isn't going to be a formal problem because we can.
No, I could just give you the formalization, and there would be you can grab
formalization, but we can use like a construction of as like to designate a qualification.
Construction of what?
We can construct, like, for example, we can use like the term as to indicate a reference which is being considered when it comes.
Do you understand what I mean by an explicit formal problem versus an implicit formal, an implicit problem? Do you know what I mean by that?
I'm not too sure. I understand.
An explicit formal problem is that when you formalize the statements, right, you can derive a contradiction without getting into the content of the constants. Right. So like an example would be A equals B, B equals C, but A doesn't equal C. You don't need the contents of A to know that there's an explicit contradiction if you're a classical logician, right? It doesn't matter what A stands for. It's an explicit formal issue. So I can just formalize everything I said and there would be an explicit formal problem. You don't even need to get into it doesn't matter what the variables stand for, right? So it's going to be something like this, right? For any subject of a sentence, okay, you stipulate the rule. If for any subject of a sentence, they'll call that S. S cannot simultaneously, you cannot simultaneously predicate P and Q, where P implies A and Q implies not A, right? That's the rule, correct?
Okay.
All right. So then, on your view, S possesses P. P implies A, right? Q implies not A. So then S can't possess simultaneously P and Q.
I think I reject that principle. Because I would say like a counterexample that would be like a man
If you reject the principle, you're rejecting classical logic.
Yeah, that's literally just
rejecting the principle and reject. Okay. So when it comes to like, for example, a man being both body and soul, right? We could say, well, the soul is immaterial and the body is immaterial. I mean, the soul is immaterial and the body is material, but these are going to be like two different predicates. We still refer
That's
to
part whole relation, though.
yeah, that's exactly my point too.
you're saying is a
You would
part of
formalize that
relation.
differently.
Yeah, that's the point. It's not-
So how would this be formalized differently? That's what I want to understand.
Well, because the way that you in first order logic is a predication is not part whole, right? Because when you're talking about parts and wholes, what you predicate of the whole, it doesn't follow that you can predicate of the parts.
Right, you can have things like emergent properties, like for example, a school of fish. You can't take one fish and say that in of itself is a school. A school is said when there's multiple fish. It's a property that emerges. The same way, look, your analogy of body and soul, if I have a brick that's 5 centimeters long and I build a brick wall, does it follow now that this brick wall is 5 centimeters long? No, it's a property of the brick. It's not a property of the whole wall.
Yeah, in other words, that you really have two subjects, right? You have one of those subjects of the statements is going to be the whole, and one of those subjects, or really, you can have two subjects, two different parts of a whole, and then you wouldn't have a problem. Because then what you're having is something like S is P, P implies A, and then S2, right, implies Q, Q implies not A. You wouldn't get a contradiction because you don't get S and S is A and S is not A. You get S1 is A and S2 is not A, which is
Exactly,
not.
but then there's two different subjects. So
Right.
without going to that like part whole analogy, just engaging with what Denny said, because that is important. Like that was literally just classical logic. How you said you rejected it. So on what basis do you reject what he said?
So you're saying when it comes to like the subject, right? You're saying when there's a predication being elicited and the predication, like both of the predications are mutually exclusive, then it can't be the case where a subject can actually possess these predicates.
Yeah, so I'll give the rule again. For any subject S cannot simultaneously have the predicate P and Q if P implies not A and Q implies A. That's just in classical logic.
And you're saying, but these are just going to be contradictories, basically.
Right. The way out is actually, one way out is to say that there's not one subject, Jesus, that Jesus has parts, and that one part of him is P, the other part of him is Q. P implies A, Q implies not A. There's no contradiction there because you're appealing to parts of Jesus.
So we say parts. So repeat that again. So you're saying
think about
another
this
way to get
argument.
out of it is to plead to parts?
Yeah, because that analogy that you used, where you have like one constituent of the human that could be said to be immaterial, and then another constituent of the human that could be said to material. If you do it the same way with Jesus, then there's no contradiction. But then the problem with that is, now, first of all, Jesus is neither omnipotent or not omnipotent, because that's not a property that he has. Those are properties of his parts. And the second problem is now there's two different subjects. You're not saying the same thing of the same subject.
Right. Yeah. In other words, you can't say that if part of Jesus is omnipotent, that the whole of Jesus is omnipotent. If you say the whole Jesus is omnipotent, then you get back right into the same problem.
Exactly. So you could either just say that there's two Jesuses, or that Jesus is not omnipotent and he's not.
In other words, you're so screwed, G1.
But I feel like when it comes to these predicates, I feel like especially the ones in which you induced, like for example, atemporality, like you said temporality, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing that even if we say that there's going to be like
there's going to be a formal problem
positive,
no matter what the content is.
So even if when it comes to like positive predicates and negative predicates, it's still going to be induced.
Well, if you think that if you accept that principle, which is just in classical logic, right? And if you think that the form follows that principle, right, then there's just no way out. There's absolutely no way out except part-whole relations. Or you could say, I think there was one other way, but it's not going to be fun either.
Okay, so when you say Jesus is what again?
So if you say Jesus is temporal. Okay. Jesus is God. God implies atemporality or atemporal. Jesus is human. Human implies temporal. So you get Jesus is both atemporal and not atemporal, right? And you can just formalize that to show a contradiction. You don't need the contents of the variables.
Okay, so you don't need the concept of variables. So you're saying it's just, so Jesus is God. Then what was the last statement in which you introduced here?
Human implies the predicate is temporal, and so you get a contradiction from those just in the terms of the form. Temporal, or that humans are temporal. That's probably the best way to go, honestly. Say that God is no longer atemporal.
Yeah, that's one of the solutions.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so you're saying it's gonna indicate like, so I have to reject that. What's it called? God is temporal then?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be weird to say that the humans are atemporal. It's probably way more meaningful to say that God is temporal.
And whether or not that, look, we can talk about whether this applies, but the point is when Danny formalized it just in terms of variables and you said that you reject it, that's a point that I want to talk about because that's just a rejection of classical logic. So without like mention of Jesus, so that there's no like theological implications, just through the variables alone, is this a contradiction or not?
Is this a contradiction? I feel with the sense in which you provided, sure. But I feel like when it comes to like the predicates of which are being induced, I feel like they're context dependent.
Well, okay. Well, look, I only see a couple ways out, right? You have to reject a premise or you have to reject.
But Danny, can you just formalize it one more time the way that you did before?
Yeah, so the formalization is something.
I think they're context dependent though. I feel like the predicates are context dependent.
No, but we can talk about context dependent. Like we can talk about whether it applies after. I just want, because you said you rejected this initially. So
here's what you have to, if you think it's content sensitive and you can get out of the problem, you have to reject this principle. Okay? The principle is that.
This principle.
Here's the principle, right?
I don't see why I have to reject it though. Like I can just see whether the statements themselves are just.
We'll figure out whether it's context dependent.
Okay, well, let's see if you accept that for any subject S, if S possesses Q and S possesses Q predicates, P and Q predicates, it's impossible that P and Q can imply A and not A respectively.
Yeah, because I feel like when it comes to that understanding, it's just inducing for the same subject. Is predicated by, you're saying the same subject can't possess these contradictory predicates in the same respect.
No, what he's saying is this. Look, G1. Okay, we have S.
I don't see you to reject it.
Look, we have S, and then we have S has the predicate Q, and S.
Yeah, I understand what you say, but I don't see it. Yeah, but I'm saying.
Can you accept that principle?
I can accept the principle, but I don't see
you accept the principle. Now, look, all it comes down to, G1, is whether the statements have that form. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah, but I think the statements are just ambiguous though.
Hold on, I just want to articulate that in natural language. So we're saying that for any subject, if the subject has a predicate Q and a predicate P, and predicate Q implies something contrary to predicate P, then he can't have both P and Q at the same time. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying.
Okay, so now at this point, it's very easy. It's just whether the statements, right, match that form. That's all it comes down to.
But I'm saying the statements are ambiguous. That's the whole point.
Okay, so
like uses is temporal.
We'll just see, right? Here, let's use a test. Let's do a test set of that don't have to do with the hypostatic union. Okay. So ready? Does this match this form? A what's it has a Glock. Okay, that's the first premise, right? Got it? A what's it has a Glock.
A what's it has a Glock. What's a what's it?
We'll see.
Just like some.
This is just exercise, logical exercise. A what's it has a Glock. Now, a what's it also has a block. So it has a Glock and a block. Got it?
So what's it has a Glock and a what?
A block.
And a block?
Yeah. Those are the two predicates of the what's it. The what's it
okay.
has a Glock and a block.
So now Glock implies not what. Okay? So a Glock implies.
Can you use like words which are more like?
No, this shows you what kind of problem it is. Trust me. Okay, if I say that a what's it has a Glock and implies not what. principle that we laid out?
So you said that what's it has a glock.
I'll write it down.
Yeah. Look.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's
The
better
what's
for you to
it?
write that.
Look. The what's it is the subject. The what's it has the predicate block, and the what's it also has the predicate glock. Okay. Now block implies not what. Okay, and block implies what. So does this follow the same form that we laid out, the same notation?
I'm gonna put it on the screen.
He's right,
Tina, can you put me on big screen? Do you think?
It's just
Oh, sorry, give me 1 second.
I'm just gonna write it.
okay. Yeah, perfect.
Sorry for my family's. Okay, so let me write it out because honestly, I'm doing this to show you what a formal problem is in its essence. Okay, so here are the premises, right?
Wait, we could actually do it.
So it's going to be a what's it. A what's it was it has a glock. Okay, and then second premise is a what's it has a block. Okay, and then third premise is that glock implies I'm going to change it just to make it easier. A what, okay, and four a block, okay, implies not what. Okay, do you get a contradiction from these statements?
Do you get a contradiction? What's it?
Look, and we can actually do the same
yeah.
analogy that we talked about. If we say that we have a shape, so like.
Well, I want to get there. I'm doing this for a reason.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
The reason why I'm doing this is because you can derive a contradiction and have no clue. It doesn't matter what a glock is. A glock could mean anything, right? It does not matter what these terms mean, okay? It's not content sensitive. This is the nature of a formal problem. Here, you can derive a P and not P, right? So that means that you can derive that what's it. The conclusion from this is that is what. You can derive from that this, and then what's it is not a what, which is in classical logic contradictory.
Yeah, exactly. And then
So it doesn't matter. So you understand.
And then
So it doesn't matter. So you understand.
Like corresponds to the same like formal notation that we laid out. Like
Right. Do you agree? Then I'm going to actually define this for you.
I agree, but I feel like
Okay, now watch this. I'm going to define what a what's it is. A what's it
wait, before
is
that, I just want to
Jesus.
clarify. He just demonstrated that this is not content sensitive. It doesn't
It's not
matter
content
what the
sensitive. Now I'm telling you what a what's it is. What's it is Jesus. Glock is God means human. Okay? Block is a new term for God. And then what means temporal. Okay? You've already agreed. It doesn't matter what they mean. And here I give you the meanings, you get a contradiction.
Yeah, no matter like what you implied, because you agreed that this follows, it's a contradiction, you can derive a contradiction, and you agreed that it's not content sensitive. So here, if we just substitute the terms.
Yeah, and like I earlier stated, right? And when it came to the principle, when she elicited, that would be no problem. And like I said, the principle is just illustrating. But when it comes to a subject, a subject can't possess contradictory predicates in the same respect.
Yeah, but you're telling us this. Look.
Whereas when it comes to Christ, right? Christ's predicates are not predicated of Christ in the same respect.
Okay, that's fine.
The contradiction is not going to occur. Because even when we look at, for example,
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Hold on. Because even when we look at the formulation itself, the formulation is presupposing that reading of the principle. Right, because of course the principle is stating that a contradiction is going to occur because the contradictory predicates are predicated of the same subject in the same respect.
Wait, how? What if he says that what's it is what qua glock, and what's it is not what qua block.
You're saying as, yeah, you're just saying as, yeah, but there's still going to be a same respect which is being induced. That's the point.
Okay.
You can say as.
Hold on. because look, we just gave you the same notation and you said it's not context dependent. So the
Yeah,
same
and I
way
already
that you
told you.
said,
Yeah,
the
and
same way
already-
that you said that Christ possesses these contrary properties in different respects is the same way that we can just say, you agreed this is a contradiction. Now, if I say that, oh, this contradiction is solved by saying he possesses what in a different respect than he possesses not what, does that follow?
Repeat it again, the last statement again.
Look, okay. You agreed that this notation that Denny has up, this derives a contradiction. Now, if I say, what's it is what in one respect and is not what in a different respect, does this resolve the contradiction?
Does this resolve the contradiction? Well, it just
Yes.
depends, because we have to understand the nature of the subject.
Contradiction is not defense. Look, Denny, I'm going to ask you the same thing I just asked him. Denny,
No,
this
because
contradiction
you
that
just
you
saying,
laid out...
no, because you just saying, wait, hold on, because you just say, oh yeah, there's two different respects, doesn't necessarily absolve the case if the
that's
thing
my
is
point.
contradictory.
No,
Yeah, I
that's my
understand that's your point.
Hold on.
I understand that's your point. But I'm saying,
my point is you saying,
saying,
he has two respects doesn't solve the contradiction either. You're just saying it.
why am I getting muted? What the heck?
Okay, wait, just 1 second. Before you say something, Danny, can you unmute?
But
Okay.
maybe one of us should just talk to him. I don't know.
Yeah. Look, I'll stop talking after this. I just
Okay.
want this to be out of the way. So we all agreed that this form derives a contradiction, right? And we all agreed it's not context dependent. Now, Danny, knowing that this derives a contradiction, if I said that what's it has what, qua glock, and what's it has not what, qua block, does that resolve the contradiction?
It does not.
Because that's not telling us anything. You're just saying that there's a predicate in reference to the subject, and there's another predicate in reference to the subject. That isn't telling us if the subject
Okay, well, let's do it this way. G1, I just erased it. Okay, the question is, I'm gonna from these four premises. Okay, from these four premises, can you derive a contradiction? Sorry, can you derive a contradiction from those four premises?
Yeah, I already said yes, because it's
Okay,
supposed-
and
it's the
so
same
you understand
subject.
what that means? Is that's a claim of necessity. It's not.
Yeah, I know.
It doesn't matter what's it could stand from my house.
Yeah, I understand, and I'm saying that the contradiction occurs because of the principle in which you illustrate, and the principle illustrated just suggests that a subject cannot possess contradictory predicates in the same respect.
The contradiction is derived from the principle that you accepted. The principle is that for any
Yeah, the
subject.
principle is there, and I'm giving the reading of that principle. That's the whole point, and I'm
Okay,
saying
well,
that the reason why
let's
is
write the principle in. Okay, let's write the principle in just so that we're on the same page. Okay. So here's the principle: is that for any S, okay, any subject, if S cannot simultaneously have P and Q, simultaneously have P and Q predicates, where P and Q imply A and not A respectively. That's the principle. Do you accept that principle?
Yeah, I accept the principle. I never said I don't
Okay.
respect the principle.
I don't know what else to say. Without getting, the next level would be like understanding that this is not, it doesn't matter what S stands for. So if S stands for Jesus.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, so
but
where are we
saying-
disagreeing?
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's just like inducing the idea that when it comes to the subject in the sentence and the predicates within that sentence, where the predicate is being applied to the subject in the same respect. That's the whole point. That's the disagreement.
There's no such thing as in respect when it comes to this principle.
You just said respectively. So what does respectively indicate here?
Respectively means in order, meaning that if P implies A and Q implies not A, it doesn't have to do with a sense like English has two senses. One has to do with nationality, the other one has to do with language. Respectively means in the respective order.
In the respected order, and the order is
so I can just read. Do you understand what I mean?
I said, what's the order going to indicate here again?
All respectively means that where P implies A and Q implies not A. That's all that means.
Yeah, you said P implies.
You know what
A.
respectively means? Like if I say that I went to the store, I bought some salami, and then I went to the movies that in that respective order. Do you understand what that means?
Yeah. That's in the respective order. Yeah, sure. But
Right. So all it's just saying is that P implies A and Q, where
yeah, P implies A and Q implies not A. That's the point.
it just
And
means
you're just
where P
saying,
and Q imply not A and not A.
Danny, I think if you just reword
and
it,
you're saying, and you're, that's the whole. Because even when we look at like, for example, you said the order, right? And you're stating that when it comes to the order, it's going to be a sequence, right?
I'm going to read. I can't believe we're stuck
just
on
say
this
where
point.
P implies
P
A and Q
implies A and Q implies not A. That's all that meant, G1.
Yeah, and that's just going to be in the same respect.
No,
like
no.
even if that isn't even illustrated,
No,
so that isn't
no,
going to be in the same respect.
No. There's nothing like that in the principle.
So there's no there's no respect which is being understood.
Yeah, let me explain why. Let's just look at something that we agree on. Do you think that this is sufficient? Is this sufficient for a contradiction?
Is it sufficient for a contradiction? Yeah, of course.
No, according to you, you need the added a statement that
Because the respect is because respect is always understood. Like what the heck?
No.
Because when you say P and not P, you're saying this thing is not this and not that. It's a respect which is being understood.
Okay. So then why it doesn't make any difference here?
look.
Yes, that's the whole point. Because I'm saying it's still the same thing. What the heck? You just illustrated the same thing.
Danny, this is what he's
You
saying.
want to try?
He's saying, look, S has A qua P, and S doesn't have A qua Q.
Is that what you
But
mean?
even just saying that doesn't get us to understand if writing S has these two things in the same respect or not. Because you can just say, for example, you could say like a man. Yeah, like you can say like a man. Let's say for example, there's two predicates, right? And you say that a man is this predicate, or man qua predicate this, and qua predicate X and qua predicate Y. Both of these predicates is not going to really tell us if it's being applied to the same subject in the same respect, just because we use the term qua. Because I feel like when it comes to the way in which you illustrate this qua example, you kind of indicate why it's like a linguistic convenience.
Let me just understand our disagreement. Okay, we agree that this is true, right?
Yeah, I believe it's true. And
Okay, and I added to it. I added the word necessarily. Is that okay?
Yeah, there's no disagreement.
Okay, so we agree this is true. And so our disagreement, and we agree that even if we substitute and then you're saying if we substitute S for Jesus and P and Q for God and human, and then A and not A for temporal and atemporal, okay, you're saying there isn't a contradiction.
Yeah, there isn't a contradiction because it isn't the same respect which is being understood.
Okay, so then just so I understand our disagreement. Our disagreement is that this principle, right, doesn't always imply a contradiction if some set of statements match the form. Is that what you're saying?
If some set of, like, you have to explain what that means. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so that's to say that if I create a set of statements that match the form of this principle, that there are cases where it doesn't imply a contradiction. That's what you have to say.
You kind of reinstated the same thing.
He's saying that there can be, like, look, this form that he just laid out, S having P and Q, where P implies A and Q implies not A, that this isn't always true. It can be a contradiction in some cases. It can be not a contradiction.
No. That's not what God forbid.
You see what I'm doing, G1? I'm trying to figure out where we disagree. I can
tell you where. Look,
go ahead.
So if you replace these terms with, like, S is Jesus and P is divinity, Q is humanity, and then A is atemporality, and Q is temporality. He's saying, like, look, actually, just write that out, right?
Okay, what do you want me to write?
S is going to be Jesus.
S equals Jesus.
And P is divinity.
Okay, is God. And Q
is humanity.
Is human. That's because these are predicates.
Yeah. And then A is just going to be temporality. Or, like, you could probably swap them because...
You want me to swap A? Oh, I see. Okay, I can just
to avoid the confusion. Yeah. But
right. So A is P implies A, so atemporal. That's right.
Yeah. So what he's saying is he would say, okay, Jesus is atemporal qua divinity and not atemporal qua humanity. Is that correct?
Jesus is atemporal, qua divinity. Jesus, repeat that again, bro.
Look, okay, so what I'm saying, this form, if we literally construct the same form and use these like S equals Jesus, if I say that the solution is Jesus is atemporal qua divinity and not atemporal qua humanity or temporal qua humanity, this resolves the contradiction.
See, yeah, practically. Yeah. So
Okay,
there's two
wait, I have a way to go, Kalam. What about this, okay? What if it's like this? S is Danny, okay? Okay, is there a contradiction if I replace this with Danny?
Well, no, because if the hypostate union is what's being referenced here, then no.
Wait, then make sure I understand. Maybe we talk past each other because I don't believe the answer. It's correct.
No. If we're replacing the person,
Yeah, it's me.
and we're saying you're the divine person, then no, the contradiction's not gonna occur. No.
So there's no contradiction in saying that I am God and human right now.
No, but
Well, right now, yes, of course, but hypothetically.
Wait, well, how is there a contradiction?
Yeah, because we're saying in this case, if we substitute you being the person and your personhood is divine,
Yeah.
there is going to be a contradiction here, no?
Okay, what's the
You're
contradiction?
saying that your personhood is created, then sure, yeah, there's going to be a
No,
contradiction.
but I'm
It can't be a case where
uncreated qua.
you can actually have a divine
I'm
nature.
uncreated qua my divine nature.
Yeah, but you can't be uncreated qua divine nature, because if you're uncreated qua divine nature, then it's just going to suppose, but the subject being you is also uncreated. Whereas the subject being you,
How is there a contradiction here, but not a contradiction?
wait, hold on.
I said it isn't a what? I said it isn't a contradiction.
Hold on. Yeah.
Listen.
What you just said, G1.
I said it isn't a contradiction.
There is no contradiction. There's possible.
I said yes, it's possible if you
It's possible
being
for me to be
substitute
God
with the
and
divine
man right
person.
now.
Yes, if you're a divine person, sure.
Hold on, you said something important.
I don't see any contradiction here.
What you said is that if Danny says he's uncreated qua divinity, that's just gonna imply that he's uncreated.
If he's uncreated qua divinity, it's just going to be no, because earlier he stated that his
Wait, but
person
that's what you
isn't
use.
uncreated.
I could have
He
sworn.
stated, hold on. He stated his person isn't uncreated. That's the point. And I said because his person isn't uncreated.
No.
of course it's gonna be
I'm
uncreated.
uncreated qua divinity, but I'm created qua humanity.
You're created qua. We don't even believe this applies to Christ.
I'm not saying it's not about Christ.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is just going to be a problem.
The point is that we agree. Actually, this is good. We agree that that's not enough to get out of the contradiction. To say,
Yeah,
qua,
but I'm saying there's a problem both. Yeah, but I'm saying there's a problem both ways. Because if you're saying you're uncreated qua divinity, then you're saying you're created qua humanity. Then you're just saying that your personhood is created uncreated, which is just going to be.
That's the point.
That's the point.
But we don't
That's the whole
say,
point.
hold up. But we don't say. Yeah, but we don't say that when it comes to Christ. We don't say that Christ is uncreated qua divinity.
Forget
Christ
created. Look, if we just
don't-
replace created, hold on, what you just said, if we replace created with temporal, you would say that Christ is atemporal qua divinity and not atemporal qua humanity.
Yeah, because of
Okay,
course,
so-
that's going
wait,
to designate. That's going to designate the nature. But then,
Are we gonna have to write this out, Kalam?
Then I did say, hold on, and I legit did say that there is going to be a problem if you substitute Danny, and Danny here is just going to be considered to be a divine person.
Okay, let's start with the
Legit, I
Greek.
said that.
By the way, I'm not. G1 and I are getting along. I'm not going to mistreat him. Okay, like he's like we're friendly right now. So I'm not. I'm keeping it together. Look,
Right now, the uncreated and created, like what we agreed, that's a contradiction.
yeah,
Because you
because
said-
there's a good thing here in that we agree there's a contradiction from here, right? What can you derive from here? You can derive that S is not A and S is A, right? You could derive that.
Yeah, of course, there's going to be a contradiction, and even if you
Okay,
put
so
Jesus-
now I'm gonna change this to atemporal, or okay. So is there a contradiction?
No, because look, when it comes to the term created and atemporal, created is just going to designate the subject itself.
Okay.
So
There's
gonna be
no way
covered.
around this. I'm sorry, there's no way around this.
Bro,
The
they
fact
legit,
that-
they
let me
legit is,
explain.
bro. Legit is when you substitute yourself.
Here, listen to what I'm about to say.
In
Listen to
the
what I'm about to
equation.
say. G1, what you've done is when I change this to uncreated, right? There's a contradiction. But when I change it to atemporal,
Oh no! I said my bad.
Okay.
Uncreated isn't a contradiction. I said create, like saying.
so there's no contradiction
create.
here.
No, there isn't a contradiction.
You just agreed that it was a contradiction like 2 minutes ago.
No, it's because you said it's because you said uncreated qua divinity and created qua humanity. That's going to be a contradiction.
How is that not the same as this?
Because you're not saying Danny's is created.
Yeah, we're saying Danny's uncreated qua divinity and created qua humanity.
And by the way, you agree that...
I didn't see the S is not A. Yeah, that's going to be a contradiction. Yeah, that's going to be a contradiction. Because you're saying, this is going to be a contradiction.
The predicate with a different predicate.
Okay, so this is contradiction. Okay, we agree, G1. This is.
I didn't see the bottom part. I don't have my glasses.
Okay, so but if I accept the principle, and then these are what the terms, these are the contents of the terms, what the terms stand for. We agree there's a contradiction, right?
S is not uncreated and S is good. So S is uncreated. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to change it. Okay, I'm going to change it to atemporal. Is there a contradiction?
Is it going to be a contradiction? No. That's not going to be a contradiction.
Okay, so what's happened here is the principle. You cannot accept the principle. The principle you can only derive a contradiction in some cases, but not all cases. So it's not necessarily. You're rejecting the principle. That's what's going on.
No, wait, hold on. Go a bit down.
Okay.
I'm trying to look at the formula itself.
Okay.
Uncreated. S is not A. Yeah, but the difference here is because when we talk about like atemporality, it's just designating the nature in reference to the thing itself.
It's okay. You can have whatever explanation, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm saying this.
I understand what you're trying to say, but
let me repeat it just for everyone else then. You're saying that there is a flat out contradiction when A stands for something specific. It's content, but when it stands for
because when you say like. Yeah, because the difference, because it's not really designating the person itself, but the nature and reference to the person.
Look, the point is, you can explain all you want. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily. There are things that can stand for A where you don't get a contradiction, which means that you're rejecting the principle. The principle is not universal. It's not necessary.
No. I don't really think that's the case.
Okay, let me start from the top, okay? If you accept this principle, right? This principle, right? I didn't even finish the principle. For any cannot. It's impossible. You see the cannot? Simultaneously have both predicates. But notice that when I change it to atemporal, Danny can have both predicates.
Wait, go back. How'd it cool?
Okay, just so you know, you accept what's highlighted, right?
Wait, Danny, I have to go in a bit, innit? We can carry on this conversation on Discord or whatever. But
okay.
Yeah, carry on. I've got like 2 minutes left.
You accept what's highlighted that necessarily for any S cannot simultaneously have P and Q predicates, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so that means that in all cases, okay, if it follows this form, then you're going to get a contradiction. But when you say that we agree that if it's uncreated, you get a contradiction. But then when I change it to atemporal, here's a case where you do not get a contradiction, and you can you can have a case where you can have both predicates, which means that you're rejecting the principle.
No, I'm not rejecting the principle. I'm just saying that when it comes to the term uncreated, it's always designating the person. So if you're saying the person is uncreated,
talk about it later. You're just not getting it.
I say no. I'll carry on with the conversation with you on Discord later.
Okay.
Because I have to go.
Okay.
In a bit.
Yeah, take care, man. Look, Danny, what he's saying is that the term uncreated designates the nature and the term temporal designates the person. But I really don't see how that's solving anything.
It's very simple, right? If you accept a principle, for all A's, they're B's. But then you find a case where A is not a B, and you're fine with that, you're just rejecting the principle.
Right. It's literally like all you
right. Here he found a case where you don't get a contradiction and you can have both predicates even though imply A and not A. That's just what it means to reject the principle, and he doesn't know it. It doesn't matter what your explanation is. And I know you're trying to figure out his explanation, and that's one way to work with him is like go from his explanation to the... But really, if he can't understand that he's rejecting the principle, I don't think there's any way to make progress.
Yeah, it really just seems like initially it was just a rejection of classical logic. Then he's like, okay, wait, I can't reject classical logic. let me relook at this. Then we visited again. He agrees that, okay, the form is correct, but he's like, it doesn't have to derive a contradiction. Then he agrees it derives a contradiction, but he says, no, it's context dependent. Then he agrees that it derives a contradiction and it's not context dependent, yet somehow comes back full circle and says that it's context dependent again.
Right. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it is crazy, but thank you for coming up, man. Like, wallahi, I was trying to find a way to articulate it, but you, like, that notepad was useful, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's also easier to talk about predicates and meaning rather than properties too. I think, because then you don't, because predicates are compatible with whatever metaphysics that you have, whether you think there are, whatever you think about natures and properties and universals. People, nominalists, I think they're predicates. Also, realists think they're predicates. So it's actually a pretty nice way to kind of overcome all of the metaphysical baggage.
Yeah, thank you for your explanation. And I hope, Christian Cope, I hope you got that. But anyways, Tina, we talked for a long time, so is there anything you want to say?
W. That's what I want to say.
Daniel, okay?